This is uktvGOLD, part of the UK TV network.
Portraits can give you a good idea of the history of a nation, its shifting morals, values, taste, as well as the ebb and flow of its politics. In Britain, the images of the men and women who've left a mark on the country's history are housed in London's National Portrait Gallery. Historically, the greatest influence on English portraiture was the arrival of the Renaissance painter Hans Holbein at the court of Henry VIII in 1532. Henry isolated England by breaking away from the dominant power of the Catholic Church. He hired Holbein to create a new, independent and above all powerful image of himself.
He needed someone to transform that bulk. He also needed someone to present him as an imperial image after the appalling antics of what he got up to with the church. He had, as it were, broken off from any other form of power. He had to achieve it himself. So Holbein came over, saw the problem, understood what was required, and transformed that irascible bulk into an extraordinarily powerful image of imperial strength.
The power of the portrait was not lost on Henry's daughter, Elizabeth I. She ruled during turbulent times and demanded to be portrayed as a strong figurehead inspiring loyalty and affection.
Elizabeth I realises perhaps even more keenly than her father what you can do with your own image, how you can use it as a propaganda tool for what you wish to achieve politically. She has herself painted rather as if she were the Virgin Mary. She's the Virgin Queen. She looks like an icon.
During this period of religious turmoil, Elizabethan portraiture avoided styles that could be labelled either Catholic or Protestant. Her successor, James I, and later his son, Charles I, had no such qualms and eagerly promoted the ornate Baroque portraiture favoured by Catholic Europe.
The court of Charles I was incredibly inward-looking. It created the kind of Arcadian fantasy world which you see in the portraiture of Sir Anthony van Dyck. It idealises people and gives them a kind of grandeur, an hauteur, a kind of feeling they're superior beings on another planet.
But the heady days of Charles's court were numbered. After losing the Civil War, Charles was executed by the parliamentary forces led by Oliver Cromwell. The victorious Puritans favoured a simple pared-down style, characterised by Cromwell's instruction to Samuel Cooper to paint me warts and all. After 11 years of Puritan rule, the monarchy was restored. Charles II shared his executed father's taste for the art and architecture of the Baroque. His passion can be seen in the court portraits of the day, particularly in those of his many buxom mistresses. Despite the restoration of the monarchy, the structure of British society was rapidly changing. After centuries of domination by the court, portraiture was now becoming all the rage amongst the increasingly influential professional classes.
The burgeoning middle classes certainly provided money for portraiture, and where you have money and achievement, you have portraiture.
When you look at 18th century portraits, let's say Mr. and Mrs. Andrews sitting in that field, they're quite grand in a way, but you do feel an enormous intimacy about that young couple, and they're rather proud of that field next to them. It's a very different feeling from the 17th century.
You get a considerable shift away from aristocracy towards meritocracy in portrait art.
The enormous wealth generated by the Industrial Revolution guaranteed the ascendancy of the middle class. This no-nonsense world of industrialists and empire builders was reflected in portraits which became increasingly formal, straight-laced and businesslike.
The difference between the 19th century, particularly as we go on in the 19th century and the 18th century, is that they were culturally and ideologically very different periods. To look at, they were far straighter, more formal. The haircut replaces the wig, for example, and people don't gesture as much. They're far more tied down to formalized roles. And also, morally, there are far clearer guidelines as to behavior, and I think that reflects itself, particularly in high Victorian portraiture.
The invention of the camera was to have a profound effect on the future of portraiture. Photography was to become a radical medium, but in the hands of early portrait photographers it was anything but.
Early photography is completely dominated by the idea that it should try and aspire to look like painting. The whole way that sitters are composed, the backgrounds, the backdrops, the relationship of the sitter to their setting, all of that comes straightforwardly from portraiture.
The great genius, of course, is Julia Margaret Cameron, and she did the close-up. Those close-ups are some of the greatest portraits ever taken. They are just revelatory. You stare at them. And she did all the great people, the Tennysons and the Dickens and the rest of it. They're all there. They are far better than any painted image.
As photography became increasingly popular, many artists felt released to represent the human figure in a more painterly manner. This liberation led to movements such as Impressionism and later on abstraction. To many, the portraits that matter today are those that reveal the psychological rather than the physical attributes of the sitter, and that's where the canvas still scores over the camera.
If you question the relevance of portraiture by painters and sculptors as opposed to photographers, you need just to look at an image, say Maggie Hambling's Dorothy Hodgkin. She was the person who discovered the makeup of penicillin and of insulin, won Nobel Prizes. She was an amazing scientist. And Maggie Hambling, when she painted her with 5 hands. Now, obviously, she doesn't have 5 hands, but this gave you a feeling of what she was like, that even for a portrait, she couldn't sit still, she was constantly moving. And I think that's what portraiture still offers us. It's able to get within, it's able to show, hopefully, the soul of a person in just one image.
To attract a younger audience to portraiture, the National Portrait Gallery recently launched an annual competition to tempt contemporary painters back to the art form. In 1997, one of the BP Award winners was given the chance to portray one of the most famous faces in the world.
When I first got the gig, do the Queen, everyone said, don't touch it with a barge pole. It's the Queen, the most famous person on the planet. Everyone knows what the Queen looks like, so if you get it wrong, just go, it doesn't look like the Queen.
Once revealed, the portrait prompted a media furore.
Everyone just thought about the cliche off with her head. I mean, of course, that was going through my mind at the time when I was painting it. People are going to say that. But in a way, I didn't really mind, because we see the Queen's head off all the time on stamps, coins, you know, pound notes, whatever. But when you actually stick it in the context of a portrait, all hell lets loose. And that's the power of the portrait, you see. People always have opinions about it.
So as we enter the 21st century, the portrait seems very much alive and kicking. The portrait still retains the power to reflect the spirit of the age, making the genre as relevant today as it was at the time of Henry VIII and Holbein.
uktvGOLD's knockout comedy. They know the rules.
The test of skill. When I'm going to be your turn, dear, you'll be it. He'll be out and I'll be in, won't I? I hope you're listening to all this, Boris.
They've picked their partners.
I'm only going to play if I can play with Eddie.
Seeing as there's no one else, I could try. I'm on your side.
I'm so glad to know that we shall have support such as yours.
They've chosen their tactics.
If I was you, Bill, I would keep a very low profile.
If someone provokes you, what are you supposed to do? Back off?
What happens if they're bigger than you? You're not going to wrestle with him, are you?
And now they enter the ring to do battle.
The worst fights you've ever seen.
I threw him across the room.
Are you all right, Bill?
Is he winding me up?
But who are the ultimate hilarious heavyweights? You decide.
Go out there, pick yourself a victim.
I'm likely to do some damage.
I want them to kill me!
Knockout comedy.
Once they cross that doorway, I'll have them.
Weekends from 8 on uktvGOLD.
uktvGOLD's Sunday morning trip in the TARDIS is a biggie now. Can Doctor Who fend off the giant spiders?
Here's a funny thing. When Archimedes, you've heard of Archimedes, jumped out of his bath and ran down the road without his clothes on, he didn't shout Eureka, he shouted, I'm a streaker.
Doctor, this is a complete waste of time.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the management takes great pleasure in presenting to you that exotic Turkish delight of the East, Sherid Zadi.